Yeah, come on, here we go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spark. I'm Joanne Murphy, and today I have a really wonderful guest, and her name is Samantha Shih. Samantha is the owner and founder of a Boston-based custom clothing line and company called Nine Tailors. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Samantha Shih, and I am the founder of Nine Tailors, like you said. And I founded Nine Tailors 12 years ago, basically out of my apartment. I was coming from a consulting background, so I worked at Deloitte Consulting for 3 years, and then I went to school in China through the Johns Hopkins program there. And coming out, I knew that I wanted to live in Boston, but I wanted a connection back to Asia, and because I'm actually from Hong Kong, and my parents and my brother, they all live in Hong Kong. So I wanted some reason for me to go back to Hong Kong and not for me to pay for it personally. And so it was very selfish. I just made a list of all the things that I really wanted in my next career step. And then I realized as I was making this list, I was like, wow, there aren't that many jobs out there that will allow me to live in Boston, but then also fly me to Hong Kong. And I wanted it to be creative. I wanted to be somewhat entrepreneurial. And I was like, you know what? I can't find a job out there. I'm just going to make myself a job. And what was interesting was that during the time when I was in China, I made a lot of custom clothes for myself because I'm short. I'm only 5 feet. And buying clothes and anywhere is sort of a nightmare because I'd still have to go back and get it altered, and it just takes a lot of time, and it's not necessarily the most cost-effective way to get clothes. And I'm sure you've been to Asia, so you know how inexpensive it's just the norm to get clothes made. And for instance, like Chinese New Year, you get new clothes made from your family tailor and you get to wear those new clothes for the New Year. And it wasn't the norm here because it was prohibitively expensive for most, or it wasn't the cultural phenomenon to make clothes for yourself. And so I was like, you know what? I'm making clothes for myself in China. I might bring the service here. And so I looked at the economics of it. I did a business model, and I did sort of a business plan for myself. And I was like, you know what? I'm still young. I still have a long career roadmap ahead of me, and if it fails, I can still go back into corporate world. And my parents were super encouraging. They're very, I would say, non-Asian, even though they're Asian. So they've always pushed me to pursue my passions and my interests. And my dad is an entrepreneur, so he was like, you know what, you should just go and do it because you don't have a family, you don't have a mortgage right now, and this is the best time to do it. And my mom, who's the more logical one, was like, okay, who's going to do your taxes and who's going to be your accountant and things like that. She was much more practical, but still extremely encouraging. And so then I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And at the end of 2008, we launched Nine Tailors.
How do you set yourself apart? How do you stay heard? How do you make your voice heard?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think for people who are of Asian descent, they are taught to be humble. They're taught not to talk about themselves, and they are taught to work hard and not ruffle the feathers too much. And culturally, I think if you're in an environment where that's not the norm, that's not the majority culture, is to stay quiet. And what I've learned over the last, even in the last year or two, is that if you don't buy a lottery ticket, you are not going to win, right? So, so there are just like simple things that I think that I do in a male-dominated industry that I think sets me apart. Is one, just very, very simple. Usually when I go to networking meetings, and it's usually full of men, particularly, they're not Asian usually, and I'm usually the only minority in that situation. I try not to dress like them. So like in networking, I think you're taught, okay, you're supposed to dress professionally, which I do, but you're supposed to dress in dark colors and things like that. And being a short Asian woman is very, it makes you feel invisible sometimes, because you're usually talking to people who are not the same color as you, and they're usually taller, their voices are usually louder. And so the way that I stand out now is that I've decided that I'm only going to wear color in these types of situations, because they may not remember me as an Asian person, but they're going to remember that somebody wore red and that I wore a red dress or something like that. So that's just very, very simple. And also, I'm not in an industry where because I'm in the fashion industry, people expect me to not wear things that are conventional looking. So I think that's just the expectation. The second thing that I always do is that I always try to, I reach out to people who I think will be my advocates. And that is also something that I have had to teach myself to learn how to do, because there are, as your career progresses, and I'm sure that you've encountered this, is that you have potential mentors and you have potential advocates who are, really trying to push and trying to encourage and trying to support you. But sometimes they may not have the time to support you. They may not remember to support you, and the timing of their support may not align with the timing of what you need at that point. So it's really important to go to your advocates and say, I know you've been an advocate of mine. I would love for you to help me with X, Y, and Z. And one thing that I learned actually from Ian So, who is also part of ACE Next Gen, he won one of the honorees for the Boston Business Journal 40 Under 40. And I was talking to him and I was like, oh, how did you go about doing that process? He's like, you know what, I just put my name in the hat, and of course he has the qualifications to win that nomination and win that honor. And then I was like, okay, if I don't put my name in the hat, I'm never going to win the lottery. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to write to all of my advocates and say that this is what I'm interested in doing, and this is what I'm interested in pursuing. And my advocates were more than happy to write a recommendation for me and write a reference for me. It's not because they don't think those things about you, or they don't think highly of you. It's just that sometimes you just need to ask them directly. And so again, being someone of Asian descent, I feel like sometimes it's hard to ask other people for help. And it's also hard to be like, can you promote me or write a reference for me, and to promote me in that way. And so that I learned from Ian. So thank you, Ian. But then also I've had to sort of like think about, okay, if I really want to be heard, I have to have the courage to be heard.
Sam, you have been just a wonderful, delightful guest. Thank you for being on our program. We really appreciate it. And thanks to the audience. Thank you all for listening to Sam's story. We appreciate you as well. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter under Joanne Tabalea Murphy, as well as LinkedIn, for the latest Spark updates. And thank you for sharing your spark with us, Sam. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great speaking with you. Yeah.